She thought her mother-in-law's whispered words were prayers, but they were a plan to steal her child. It was a glorious day, the kind of day when the sun seemed to shine just for this moment, casting golden light on every smiling face, every carefully arranged flower, every silk ribbon fluttering in the breeze. The church was packed to capacity. Polished wooden pews gleamed under sunlight streaming through tall stained glass windows, filling the air with warm amber tones. The scent of white lilies mixed with incense, creating an atmosphere that promised fresh starts and new beginnings. At the church entrance, surrounded by bridesmaids in lavender dresses, she stood waiting. Her wedding gown was an exquisite blend of French lace and pearls, the veil falling like a misty cloud over her shoulders. Her name was Clara, 23 years old, 3 months pregnant, about to marry a man she'd known for only 8 months. A man her family knew nothing about. The organ music swelled, the doors opened. 300 guests rose to their feet. Clara walked toward the altar, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Not from happiness, at least, not entirely, but from something darker, a strange feeling, as if she were walking not toward a bright future, but toward something carefully disguised as one. She had no father to walk her down the aisle, no mother to help with her veil. An orphan since age 17, Clara had learned the hard way that the world doesn't offer second chances to girls like her. Only brief windows of opportunity that slam shut fast. When she met Ricardo, a man from old money with a surname that opened doors, with sweet promises whispered under moonlight, she grabbed that chance with both hands. She needed this marriage. Desperately. Walking alone down the aisle, she felt 300 pairs of eyes tracking her every step. Critical eyes, judging eyes, curious eyes. Who is she? Someone whispered. Where did she come from? Another voice murmured behind a program. Clara kept her chin up, smiled softly. Her face was pure serenity, a mask covering a whirlwind of doubt. But her eyes, if you'd looked closely, told a different story. Sharp, observant, seeing everything, every movement, every whisper, every glance the guests exchanged. She wasn't naive. She knew exactly how this family saw her, as a gold digger, an unknown intruder, a girl with no pedigree, no family connections, no money, just a pretty face and a convenient pregnancy that happened to entrap their son. But what they didn't know about Clara could fill libraries. At the altar, Ricardo waited, tall, broad-shouldered, in a tuxedo that probably cost more than Clara made in a year as a secretary. His smile was practiced, perfect, almost plastic. He offered his hand. She took it. His grip was warm but tight, possessive, like he was claiming ownership. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "Thank you," she replied, her voice soft as silk. At the altar's side stood Ricardo's mother, Beatriz. 62 years of refined elegance, inherited wealth, and decades of accumulated social control. Her navy dress wasn't meant to blend, it was meant to assert dominance. The 3-strand pearl necklace, the diamond earrings that caught the light like weapons. And when she looked at Clara, her smile was honey-laced with arsenic. "Welcome to the family, dear," Beatrice had said at the rehearsal dinner the night before, gripping Clara's hands much harder than a refined woman should. "We're so happy to have you." But when she said happy, it came out wrong, like a musical note played slightly out of tune. Wrong enough that anyone really listening would know something was off. Clara noticed. She smiled anyway, thanked her, and returned to her plate while her mind calculated every angle. Because Clara wasn't who they thought she was. Not even close. The ceremony began. The priest, a white-haired man with a deep voice, opened the Bible and began to recite the sacred words that would unite 2 lives. The same words repeated for centuries, in thousands of churches, for millions of couples. Words that promised eternal love, unwavering fidelity, mutual respect. Clara listened, but her mind was elsewhere. It was on the glances Dona Beatriz cast in her direction. Quick, calculating, like a cat assessing a mouse trapped in a corner. It was in the conversations she had accidentally, or perhaps not so accidentally, overheard in the family mansion's corridors during the wedding preparations. "She's so young," said one of Ricardo's aunts, her voice dripping with condescension, "and without family. How will we know where she really comes from?" "Ricardo has always been impulsive," another voice replied, this one belonging to Ricardo's older sister. "But this time he's outdone himself. Marrying a secretary? What a disgrace." "At least she's pregnant," came Dona Beatriz's voice, cutting through the others like a blade. "That solves some problems, but it creates others." Silence. "What do you mean, mother?" asked the sister. "I mean," Dona Beatriz said slowly, each word chosen with surgical precision. "A baby is a blessing, but only when it's in the right hands. In the right hands, an heir secures the future. In the wrong hands," she left the sentence hanging in the air, unfinished, threatening. Clara, hidden behind a half-open door, felt a chill run down her spine. Her hands instinctively went to her belly, protecting the small being growing there. But she said nothing. She confronted no one. She didn't run to Ricardo with accusations and fears, because Clara knew something that family didn't. She knew how to survive. An orphan at 17, alone in the world at 18, working 3 jobs at 19, studying at night, saving every penny, learning to read people like some read books, learning to move in silence, to observe without being seen, to think 5 steps ahead. When Ricardo met her, he saw a beautiful girl with sad eyes and a shy smile. When Dona Beatriz met her, she saw a threat that could be controlled, manipulated, and eventually discarded. Neither of them saw who Clara truly was. Neither of them realized that behind those seemingly innocent eyes was a mind that cataloged every detail, every inconsistency, every lie whispered in a low voice. "Do you take Ricardo as your lawful husband?" the priest asked. "I do," Clara said, her voice firm and clear. A collective sigh of relief swept through the congregation, as if everyone had been holding their breath, expecting her to flee at the last moment. But Clara wasn't the type to flee. She faced things. "Do you take Clara as your lawful wife?" the priest asked Ricardo. "I do," he replied, his smile widening. The rings were exchanged, the final words were spoken. The kiss was given, prolonged enough to draw applause and whistles from the younger guests. They were, officially, husband and wife. The recession began. The organ played a triumphant melody. Clara and Ricardo walked arm in arm down the aisle, smiling at familiar and unfamiliar faces. Rose petals were tossed into the air, creating a fragrant and colorful shower. Outside the church, the sun shone even brighter. Photographers positioned themselves strategically. The family gathered in groups for photos. Hugs were given. Congratulations were offered. And through it all, Clara felt Dona Beatriz's eyes on her. Constant, unwavering, like a bird of prey watching its next meal. At the reception, held in the city's most prestigious ballroom, the tables were decorated with floral arrangements that cost a fortune. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling. An orchestra played classical music. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and canapes. Clara moved through the crowd like a dancer, greeting guests, thanking them for gifts, accepting kisses on the cheeks and superficial hugs. Ricardo was by her side most of the time, but occasionally he was pulled into business conversations with uncles and cousins. It was during one of these moments, when Clara was temporarily alone near the dessert table, that one of Ricardo's cousins approached. Her name was Juliana, 28 years old, a lawyer, and, according to the rumors Clara had collected, someone who once had a romantic interest in Ricardo. "Congratulations," Juliana said, her tone too neutral to be genuine. "Thank you," Clara replied, maintaining her polite smile. "You must be so happy," Juliana continued, picking up a brigadeiro from the table without really looking at it. "Getting all this, the family, the name, the financial security." Each word was a small knife, cutting from different angles. Clara tilted her head slightly. "I'm happy because I love Ricardo. The rest is just a bonus." "Oh, of course." Juliana smiled, finally meeting Clara's eyes. "Love, how romantic. But tell me, Clara, where are you from again? Ricardo was so reserved about your details." "Nowhere special," Clara said softly. "Just an ordinary girl who got lucky." "Lucky?" Juliana repeated the word as if tasting it. "Yes, I suppose it was luck. Getting pregnant with the child of one of the city's wealthiest families." "How?" "Lucky you are." The silence that followed was dense, heavy, full of unsaid things. Clara could have responded. She could have defended her honor, her pregnancy, her marriage, but she didn't. Instead, she simply looked at Juliana with those eyes that seemed naive, but were anything but. "Yes," she said finally. "Very lucky." And then she walked away, leaving Juliana alone with her own poisons. The night progressed, dinners were served, speeches were made. Ricardo's father spoke about family and legacy. Ricardo's sister spoke about love and commitment. Ricardo's friends shared funny stories from his youth. But it was Dona Beatriz's speech that made Clara pay full attention. She rose slowly, like a queen ascending her throne. Her presence commanded immediate silence. All eyes turned to her. "My dears," she began, her voice soft but penetrating. "Today we celebrate not only the union of 2 young people, but the continuation of a lineage, a tradition, a legacy that has passed through generations of our family." She paused, letting the words resonate. "Ricardo, my beloved son, you have chosen a wife. And while she may not come from where we expected, while she may not have the history we imagined, she gives us something precious, an heir." Dona Beatriz looked directly at Clara. Her smile was wide. Her eyes were cold. "And for that, Clara, my dear, we are grateful. Your role in this family is clear. You will give us grandchildren. You will continue our bloodline. And we, in return, will give you a name, protection, a place to belong. Polite applause echoed through the hall. But Clara heard what wasn't said. You are a womb, an incubator. Nothing more. She smiled, nodded, thanked them, and etched every word into her memory. Later, as the party was winding down and guests began to depart, Clara found herself alone again. Ricardo was outside, bidding farewell to the last of their aunts and uncles. Dona Beatriz had disappeared somewhere inside the family mansion, where the reception was being held. Clara walked through the empty corridors. Her feet ached from her high heels. Her face ached from so much smiling. Her soul ached from so much absorbed falsehood. That's when she heard voices. Coming from an office at the end of the hall. The door was ajar. Light escaped through the crack. Clara should have kept walking. Should have gone to look for Ricardo. Should have respected others' privacy. But she didn't. Instead, she approached silently. Her steps were light. Her breathing was controlled. And she positioned herself exactly where she could listen without being seen. Dona Beatriz's voice was unmistakable. Pregnancy is a complication, but also an opportunity, she was saying. Once the child is born, we have options. What kind of options? Came another voice. Ricardo's father. Legal options, practical options. Dona Beatriz paused. Clara imagined her lighting one of her slender cigarettes. She has no family, no support network, no money of her own. If the situation becomes inconvenient, it won't be difficult to argue that she is unfit. Unfit? As a mother, as a wife, as a member of this family. Heavy silence. Are you suggesting we take the child from her? Ricardo's father's voice sounded shocked. I'm suggesting we keep our options open. Ricardo is young, impulsive. This marriage may not last, but the heir is ours, of our blood, and blood belongs to the family. Clara felt her legs tremble, her vision blurred. Her hands automatically went to her belly. You'll see, Dona Beatriz continued, her voice now softer, almost affectionate. Everything will work out, and in the end, what is ours will remain with us. Always. Clara didn't wait to hear more. She walked away from that door, from that hallway, from those voices that planned to steal her child before it was even born. Her feet carried her to an empty bathroom. She locked the door, looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes were wide. But beneath the shock, beneath the fear, there was something more. Determination. Clara wasn't stupid. She had always known this family wouldn't accept her easily. Always knew she would be seen as an intruder. But hearing their plans, verbalized so coldly, so casually, ignited something within her. A flame, a fire, a silent promise to herself and to the child growing in her womb. No one would steal her baby. No one would turn her into a puppet. No one would underestimate Clara again. She splashed her face with cold water, patted her makeup back into place. When she left that bathroom, she was composed again, serene. But behind her eyes, a different machine was working, calculating, planning, preparing for a battle she hadn't started but would absolutely finish. Because what this family didn't know was that Clara had survived things far worse than a controlling mother-in-law. She'd survived alone before, and now, with her child's life at stake, she was going to make Beatrice understand exactly what she'd awakened. Ricardo found her in the hallway. Where were you? I looked everywhere for you. Just resting a bit, Clara said, intertwining her arm with his. It's been a long day. It was perfect, he said, kissing her hair. You were perfect. Clara smiled. Thank you, my love. They walked together back to the main hall, where the last guests were leaving. Dona Beatriz saw them and waved, her face radiant with affection. My dears, she called. Come, we need one last photo. The whole family together. Clara positioned herself next to Ricardo, surrounded by his family, by the family that planned to destroy her. The photographer adjusted his camera. Everyone smile, and Clara smiled. But as the flash captured that moment for eternity, freezing those faces in expressions of manufactured happiness, a single question echoed in Clara's mind. What she had heard in the next few hours would shatter everything she thought she knew about this family, and would change the course of her life forever. The party continued vibrantly in the main hall. Lively music echoed through the decorated walls, while guests laughed and danced without a care. Sophia observed everything from the main table, a courteous smile on her lips, but her body craved a moment of peace. The pregnancy was heavier than she had imagined. Every movement required effort. The wedding dress, which had seemed perfect that morning, now tightened around her expanding waist. She needed to breathe. With care, Sophia discreetly stood up and waved to Lucas, who was animatedly chatting with friends. He returned the gesture with a warm smile. She pointed to the hallway, signaling she would be right back. He nodded, unsuspecting. After all, it was natural for the bride to need a few minutes away from the hustle and bustle. Sophia walked down the main corridor, gradually moving away from the party's noise. Her heels echoed on the marble floor. The air grew cooler with each step. She was heading for the small internal garden at the back of the mansion, a tranquil refuge her mother-in-law had shown her during the preparations. There she could sit for a few moments, caress her belly and take a deep breath. But as she approached the door leading to the garden, something made her stop. Voices, low but intense. They came from a side office whose door was ajar. Sophia immediately recognized her mother-in-law's voice. High-pitched, controlled, but laden with a strange emotion. There was another voice too, masculine, deeper. Sophia should have kept walking. She should have ignored it and gone to the garden. But something in that tone of secret conversation activated a primal instinct. Her heart raced for no apparent reason. Her hands unconsciously rested on her rounded belly. She approached the door, silently. She hid in the dimness of the corridor, where the light didn't reach. And then she listened. Her mother-in-law's voice was cold, calculating, completely different from the sweet and attentive woman who had embraced Sophia minutes earlier at the altar. "Listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you, Renato," said Beatriz, the mother-in-law. "This pregnancy is the opportunity I've been waiting for years. Finally, I'll have what is rightfully mine." Renato, Sophia knew that name. He was the family lawyer, a middle-aged man who always appeared at important dinners. He was there, in that office, on the wedding night. "Beatriz, I understand your frustration," Renato replied cautiously. "But what you're proposing is extremely risky. We're talking about my life." Her mother-in-law interrupted him with a contained ferocity. "You don't understand, Renato. I spent 40 years building this name, this heritage, this family, and Lucas is my only son, my only heir." "Yes, but Sophia is his wife now. Sophia is an intruder." Beatrice practically spat the words. "A girl with no family, no background, nothing. She came from nowhere, seduced my son, and now she's carrying a baby that should be mine to raise, mine to mold, mine to control." Sophia felt her blood run cold. Her breath caught in her throat. The words pierced her chest like sharp knives. She pressed her hand against her mouth to keep from making a sound. "I'm going to explain exactly how this will work," Beatrice continued, now with a terrifying calm. "Sophia will give birth in 2 months. At the family's private hospital, obviously. I've already spoken with Dr. Mariano. He's been loyal to me for decades. He'll ensure everything goes as planned." "What do you mean, as planned?" Renato asked, with a hesitation that revealed he already knew the answer. Beatrice sighed, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "During childbirth, there will be complications. Serious complications. Dr. Mariano will document everything appropriately. Postpartum hemorrhage, sudden collapse, organ failure. All clinically justifiable. Sophia will not survive." The words fell upon Sophia like a death sentence. Her legs trembled. She had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing right there. Tears began to stream silently down her face, smudging the impeccable makeup that had taken hours to apply. No. This couldn't be real. She was dreaming. She was having a nightmare caused by the fatigue of the party, by the day's pressure. But the voices continued, relentless. "Beatrice, you're talking about murder," Renato said, his voice low and tense. "I'm talking about survival," Beatrice retorted. "And justice. That baby is of my family's blood. He will be raised by me, with the values I determine, far from the mediocre influence of a classless mother. Lucas will suffer, of course. He will cry. He will grieve. But he is young. Eventually, he will get over it. And I will be there, taking care of him and my grandson. As it always should have been." Sophia covered her mouth more tightly, stifling a sob that threatened to escape. Her entire body trembled. Her free hands still held her belly, as if she could protect the life growing inside her with that gesture alone. "And the risks?" Renato insisted. "Investigations? Autopsies? Everything is already arranged," Beatrice replied with terrifying confidence. "Dr. Mariano will sign the death certificate. Natural causes, childbirth complications. It happens every day, Renato. No one will suspect. And even if someone raises questions, I have enough contacts to ensure any investigation is discreetly filed away." There was a pause. Sophia heard footsteps inside the office, as if Beatrice was pacing back and forth. "And you," Beatrice continued, "will prepare all the legal documentation. I want full custody of the baby transferred to me immediately after the incident. Lucas won't have the emotional capacity to care for a child alone, especially while grieving. I will be the legal guardian, and you will ensure there are no loopholes." "I need time to structure this," Renato said, his voice laden with a tension that revealed his moral discomfort, but also his willingness to proceed. "You have 6 weeks, Beatrice said firmly. "The birth is scheduled for January 15th. Dr. Mariano has already adjusted the estimated date in the medical record. Everything needs to be ready." Sophia felt an overwhelming dizziness. Her knees buckled. She had to hold onto the doorframe to keep from falling. Her mind struggled to process what she was hearing. That woman who had embraced her with tears in her eyes during the ceremony. That woman who had promised to love her like a daughter. That woman was planning to kill her and steal her baby. The crushing reality of that discovery suffocated her. "And Sophia doesn't suspect anything?" Renato asked. Beatriz laughed. A low, cruel laugh that echoed in the dark corridor like a funeral bell. "Sophia, that naive girl, she's so enchanted with the wedding fairy tale that she doesn't even notice when I'm manipulating Lucas. She trusts me blindly. It's pathetic. She truly believes I accept her, that I love her." Beatriz paused, and her voice took on a tone of absolute contempt. "She's a temporary piece, Renato, and in 2 months she'll just be a sad memory. A framed wedding photograph on the wall, nothing more." Sophia's tears now fell freely, silent, devastating. Every word was a stab. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run into that office and confront that monstrous woman. She wanted to call Lucas. She wanted to flee. But something deep within her, older than fear and stronger than despair, kept her still. An instinct for survival. A cold clarity beginning to emerge through the fog of shock and terror. If she screamed now, if she confronted Beatriz, it would be her word against her mother-in-law's. Lucas loved his mother. The whole family revered Beatriz. Who would believe Sophia? A girl without family, without resources, without power. An intruder, as Beatriz had said. And if Beatriz realized the plan had been discovered, she could change it. Anticipate. Make it even harder to escape. No. Sophia needed to be smarter than that. She needed to pretend she knew nothing. She needed to smile, embrace her mother-in-law, continue the charade. And meanwhile, she needed to think, to plan, to find a way out. Because now, she knew the truth. And the truth was a weapon. Inside the office, the conversation continued. "It's all settled then," Beatriz said, with a tone of finality. "In the coming weeks, continue to treat Sophia with affection. Keep up the pretense. The more she trusts me, the easier it will be to carry everything out without resistance." "Understood," Renato replied. "Excellent. Now go back to the party, separately. We can't raise suspicions." Sophia heard footsteps approaching the door. Her heart pounded. In a reflex of pure panic, she quickly retreated, hiding behind a column in the corridor. She held her breath, pressing her body against the cold wall. Renato came out first, adjusting his jacket. He walked down the corridor without looking around and disappeared in the direction of the ballroom. Seconds later, Beatriz emerged. Her face was serene, impeccable. She adjusted her pearl necklace, smoothed her elegant dress, and walked with the dignified posture of a matriarch. No trace of the cold, cruel woman who had just orchestrated a murder. Sophia remained hidden, motionless, until the sound of her mother-in-law's footsteps completely disappeared. Only then did she allow her legs to give way. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold corridor floor, hugging her belly with both hands. The tears came uncontrollably now. Tears of fear, of betrayal, of disbelief. She wanted to scream, but she knew she couldn't. She wanted to run, but she knew there was nowhere to go. She was alone, completely alone. But as the tears wet her face, something began to harden within her. A spark, small but burning. Beatriz had made a fatal mistake. A mistake that would cost her everything. She had underestimated Sophia. That girl, without family, without origin, without anything, had survived a lifetime of rejection and struggle. She had learned to protect herself long before meeting Lucas. She had developed survival instincts that Beatriz, with all her wealth and power, had never needed to learn. And now, those instincts were awakening. Sophia wiped her tears with the back of her hand. She took a deep breath, forcing her lungs to fill with air. She gently caressed her belly, as if speaking to the baby growing inside her. "I won't let them hurt us," she whispered, her voice trembling but determined. "I promise. We will survive this." She stayed there for a few more minutes, composing herself. She wiped her face, adjusted her dress, and took several deep breaths until the trembling in her hands subsided. Then she stood up. When Sophia returned to the ballroom, her face was serene. She smiled at the guests who greeted her. She waved to Lucas, who immediately came to her side, worried. "Are you okay, love?" he asked, holding her hands. "You looked pale." "I'm perfectly fine," Sophia lied, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I just needed some air. The party is beautiful." Lucas pulled her into a hug, and as she rested her head on his chest, her eyes met Beatriz's across the room. Her mother-in-law smiled. A warm, maternal smile. Sophia returned the smile. Equally warm, equally false. And in that moment, two women stared at each other across the ballroom, each knowing something the other didn't. Beatriz thought she had complete control. But Sophia now knew the truth, and that truth changed everything. The game had begun, and it would be a battle of life or death. It would be their fatal mistake. She returned to the room as the last tears dried on her face. Her husband was already fast asleep, snoring softly. completely oblivious to the devastation his mother had caused. She lay down beside him in bed, staring at the ceiling in the dark, and something inside her changed. It wasn't anger, it wasn't resentment, it was something far more dangerous, absolute clarity. As she lay there listening to the breathing of the man beside her, she began to think, not about what she had lost that night, but about what she still possessed. And the more she thought, the more she realized a fundamental truth. They had no idea who they were dealing with. You see, there was something this family never bothered to discover about the bride. Something she never mentioned, because she didn't need to prove anything to anyone. But now, lying in that bed, while the humiliation still burned in her chest, she began to remember exactly who she was before she met that man. She wasn't just an ordinary young woman who married for love. No, her story was far more complex than any of those guests could imagine. Let me tell you who she really was. 3 years before that wedding, she had graduated with honors in law from the Federal University. Not just graduated, she was the top student in her class, nationally recognized for her thesis on inheritance rights and marital property. Professors vied to have her as a research assistant. Prestigious law firms courted her with tempting offers. But she had other plans. While her colleagues chased high salaries in large corporations, she accepted a modest position at a non-governmental organization that defended women's rights in vulnerable communities. Not for the money, for the purpose. She spent 2 years representing women who had been stripped of their inheritances by cruel families. Women whose in-laws tried to expel them from their own homes. Women whose assets were stolen by greedy relatives. She knew every legal loophole, every legal precedent, every strategy manipulative families used to destroy vulnerable women. And she knew exactly how to fight them. Not only that, her father, who had passed away a year before the wedding, was a respected businessman who left her a considerable inheritance. Not a scandalous fortune, but enough to guarantee her complete independence. She kept this money discreetly invested, never mentioning her comfortable financial situation. After all, she wanted to be loved for who she was, not for what she possessed. How naive she had been. Now, lying in that bed, she began to piece together the puzzle. Her mother-in-law hadn't chosen her by chance. Women like her never did anything by chance. The old woman had investigated her background, discovered the inheritance, and decided that her daughter-in-law would be a lucrative addition to the family. But she also needed to ensure complete control. Hence the calculated humiliation. Hence the ritual of psychological destruction. Breaking a woman's spirit on the very first day was the most efficient way to ensure her submission for the years to come. But the mother-in-law had made a fatal mistake. She assumed the bride was like the other women she had dominated throughout her life. Fragile, uninformed, without resources, without options. She had no idea she had just declared war against someone who had spent years studying exactly this type of abuse. Someone who knew the law better than any lawyer the mother-in-law could hire. Someone who had her own means and was not financially dependent on anyone. The bride turned her head and looked at her sleeping husband. He looked so innocent there, snoring softly, so oblivious to the tornado his mother had unleashed. Part of her still loved him, but another part, the part that was awakening at that moment, knew the truth. He had chosen his mother, not with words but with silence. And silence, she had learned in her years defending vulnerable women, was the most effective form of complicity. She quietly got out of bed and went to the window. The moon illuminated the garden below, that huge house, full of guests who had witnessed her humiliation. Each of them probably thinking she would just be another submissive victim of this cruel matriarch. But as she looked out into the night, she began to mentally catalog all her resources. Not with despair, but with the clinical precision of a military strategist. First, legal knowledge. She knew that everything that had been taken from her that night technically constituted marital property. Wedding gifts belonged to the couple, not the mother-in-law. She could, if she wanted, file a lawsuit and recover every item. But that would be too quick, too painless. Second, financial resources. Her inheritance was untouched, invested in 3 different banks. She had access to funds that could sustain a prolonged legal battle without batting an eye. The mother-in-law, on the other hand, would soon discover that all that ostentation was supported by carefully hidden debts. She had seen the signs. The insistence on expensive gifts, the need to maintain appearances. Truly wealthy families don't need to prove anything to anyone. Third, professional contacts. 2 years working with women's rights had given her a network of powerful allies. Lawyers specializing in family abuse cases. Social workers who documented patterns of toxic behavior. Journalists who loved to expose hypocrisy in elite families. And most importantly, other women who had survived mothers-in-law exactly like this one. She picked up her cell phone, which miraculously had not been confiscated, and began typing a message. Not to her husband, not to her family, but to her former mentor, Dr. Amara Chen, a renowned family law attorney who had advised her thesis. "Dr. Amara, I need your guidance on a case. Personal and urgent. Can we talk tomorrow?" The answer came in less than 2 minutes, even though it was 2 in the morning. "Always available for you. My office, 9 a.m. And dear, whatever it is, remember, documentation is power." She smiled for the first time since she had walked down those stairs. Documentation. Of course. She picked up her cell phone again and began photographing everything. The empty room where her wedding gifts had been placed. The empty closets where her clothes should have been. She recorded a detailed audio describing exactly what had happened, with precise times and names of witnesses. Then she did something that demonstrated exactly how strategically her mind was working. She went to the room where the mother-in-law had stored the gifts and, using her cell phone camera, discreetly filmed each item, not to recover them immediately, but to create a forensic record that would be invaluable later. As she did this, she noticed something interesting. Among the gifts were several items still in their original boxes, with price tags. The mother-in-law planned to resell them. This was not just family cruelty, it was systematic misappropriation. Perfect. Back in the room, she began to write. Not in an emotional diary, but in a structured legal document. Every incident, every witness, every piece of evidence. She had done this hundreds of times for her clients. Now, she was doing it for herself. But she wasn't building a common lawsuit. No. She was creating something much more devastating. A complete dossier that would not only recover her assets, but expose the pattern of abusive behavior of this mother-in-law. She began to remember comments the mother-in-law had made during the engagement. Comments about other daughters-in-law who didn't work out. Veiled references to women who couldn't adapt to the family. How many other brides had this woman destroyed? She picked up her laptop, which fortunately was in her suitcase that was still in the room, and began to research. Social media, public records, newspaper archives. And there it was. Evidence of at least 3 previous marriages in the family that ended in bitter divorces. 3 women who had been expelled from the family with nothing but the clothes on their backs. She found one of them on Facebook. A young woman named Beatriz who had married the husband's cousin 5 years earlier. Divorced after 6 months. No alimony, no division of assets. Completely destroyed. The bride sent a carefully crafted private message. "Beatriz, my name is Sarah. I just married into the Santos family. I believe you were married to Daniel Santos. I need to talk to you about a delicate matter related to the family matriarch. When you can, please contact me. This is confidential and important." Then she found the second ex-daughter-in-law, and the third. Messages sent to all of them. She was building a case, not just against her mother-in-law, but against an entire family system of abuse that had operated with impunity for decades. By 4 in the morning, she had a complete plan mapped out. Not an emotional plan for revenge, but a meticulously crafted legal and social strategy that would dismantle that woman piece by piece. Phase 1, document everything. That was already underway. Phase 2, gather allies. The ex-daughters-in-law would be crucial witnesses. Phase 3, build the legal case. With Dr. Amara's help, she would prepare actions that would not only recover her assets, but establish legal precedents against family abuse. Phase 4, social exposure. Once she had solid evidence, she would ensure that every person who witnessed her humiliation would also witness her mother-in-law's downfall. Phase 5, choice. Give her husband a single opportunity to choose. This time not with silence, but with clear actions. Either he would stand by his wife, or she would leave him with nothing but his complicity. She wasn't just planning to defend herself. She was planning to dismantle an entire system. As the sun began to rise, she looked once more at her sleeping husband. He didn't know it yet, but he would wake up to a completely different world. A world where his young and supposedly fragile wife was not a victim waiting to be saved. She was the storm that was about to destroy everything. The bride smiled, saved all her documents in 3 different cloud locations, and finally allowed herself a few hours of sleep. Not the sleep of a defeated woman, but the strategic rest of a commander on the night before battle. She wouldn't just defend herself. She would dismantle that family piece by piece, expose their hypocrisies, protect future victims, and ensure that mother-in-law could never destroy another woman again. And she would do it all within the law, with surgical precision, documenting every step. Because that's what lawyers do. They turn injustice into evidence, humiliation into legal precedent, pain into power. The mother-in-law had declared war without knowing she was attacking someone who had spent years studying exactly how to win this kind of battle. And in wars, it's not the loudest who wins. It's the one who prepares best. Sarah was not just prepared. She was the weapon no one saw coming. The days that followed were like a carefully choreographed dance, where every step needed to be executed with absolute perfection. The bride woke up every day before sunrise, meticulously prepared the family's coffee, served her mother-in-law with impeccable reverence. Her mask of submission never slipped, not for a second. But behind those obedient eyes, a strategic mind worked tirelessly. During the day, she was the model daughter-in-law. She prepared her mother-in-law's favorite meals, organized the house down to the last detail, accepted criticism and insults with her head bowed. When the matriarch demanded she redo something 3-4 times, she merely nodded humbly. "Yes, mother, as you wish." The words came out meekly, while her fingers memorized each new humiliation for the mental file that grew day by day. But when the house slept, when the lights went out and silence took over the home, she transformed. Her phone lit up discreetly as she reviewed documents, confirmed secret meetings, coordinated movements with invisible allies. There were encrypted messages, meetings scheduled in neutral locations, evidence being compiled with surgical precision. On Tuesday, during a church visit, she met with a family law attorney. The man examined the documents she had brought. Photographic records of messages, audio recordings, written testimonies. He nodded slowly, impressed. "You've built a solid case," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Very solid. When you're ready to move forward, we have legal grounds for multiple actions." She left the office with a discreet folder under her arm, returning home in time to prepare dinner. On Thursday, pretending to go to the market, she met with a forensic accountant. The man analyzed copies of bank statements, suspicious transfers, financial movements she had meticulously documented. "Here," he pointed to a series of transactions, "and here, a clear pattern of diversion of marital assets. This could be crucial in a division of property." She took notes, photographed the marked documents, and returned home with shopping bags that legitimized her absence. Meanwhile, the mother-in-law grew in confidence. She saw her daughter-in-law's submission and interpreted it as victory. She began to push even harder, testing limits, increasing demands. "This room is a disgrace," she would declare, even when it was spotless. "Redo everything, and this time do it right." The daughter-in-law obeyed without question, rearranging furniture, wiping down every surface. And with each new humiliation, the matriarch smiled, feeling power consolidate in her hands. What she didn't know was that every absurd order, every gratuitous insult was being meticulously documented. The daughter-in-law had discreetly installed small recording devices in strategic locations around the house. Nothing illegal, just in common areas where there was no expectation of privacy. Every malicious comment, every whispered conspiracy on the phone, every moment of cruelty was captured and archived. On Friday, the mother-in-law called a family meeting. Seated at the head of the table like a queen on her throne, she announced her new house rules. The daughter-in-law was to wake up at 5 in the morning. All meals would need to be approved before being served. She couldn't leave without explicit permission. And, here the matriarch paused dramatically, her salary should be deposited into a joint account for better family management. The family present grew uncomfortable. The husband mumbled a weak protest, which was immediately silenced by his mother's icy glare. The daughter-in-law? She merely nodded, eyes downcast. "As you wish, mother." Inside, she silently celebrated. The mother-in-law had just created documentary evidence of coercive financial control. One more piece for the exponentially growing legal file. And then, something brilliant happened. The daughter-in-law wasn't just building a case, she was building a multi-layered trap, each layer more ingenious than the last. She had realized that the mother-in-law, intoxicated by power, was becoming careless, and careless people make mistakes. On Saturday, during a family lunch, the mother-in-law began talking about reorganizing the property. She casually mentioned that she'd consulted a lawyer about protecting family assets from inappropriate external influences. Everyone understood that inappropriate external influence meant the daughter-in-law. What the matriarch didn't realize was that the daughter-in-law was recording the entire conversation on her phone, discreetly placed on the table. Even better, the lawyer the mother-in-law had consulted, he was a partner at the firm where the daughter-in-law had scheduled her own consultation. Professional networks are smaller than people imagine. A discreet message, a conversation between colleagues, and suddenly the daughter-in-law knew exactly what strategy the mother-in-law planned to use. Knowledge is power, and she now knew every move before it was executed. The following Monday, the mother-in-law took the next step in her escalation of control. She began making public comments about the daughter-in-law at social gatherings. "She's so simple," she would say with a condescending smile to her friends. "We constantly need to educate her on how things should be done in a real family." The women laughed, some uncomfortably, others with malice. One of them, however, did not laugh. A childhood friend of the daughter-in-law, who had been strategically invited to tea. This friend said nothing during the event. But afterward, she sought out the daughter-in-law and offered something valuable: testimony. "I saw everything," she said, her eyes gleaming with indignation. I would testify anywhere about what this woman does to you." The daughter-in-law hugged her, grateful. Another ally. Another voice that could corroborate her version of events when the time came. The pieces began to fit together like a complex puzzle. The daughter-in-law had financial documentation. She had audio recordings. She had witnesses prepared to confirm the pattern of abuse. She had legal grounds for multiple legal actions. And she had something the mother-in-law would never expect: strategic patience. On Tuesday, she activated the second phase of her trap. Discreetly, she began making copies of important family documents, deeds, contracts, bank statements that the mother-in-law kept locked in her office. How? Simple. The matriarch had given the daughter-in-law the task of organizing and archiving all important papers. She wanted everything cataloged and accessible. What she didn't realize was that accessible worked both ways. The bride spent 3 days photographing documents. Every page, every contract, every receipt. She uncovered interesting things: questionable bank transfers, properties registered under straw men, income tax declarations with curious discrepancies. She wasn't an expert, but she knew people who were. And those people would be very interested in this material. On Thursday, the mother-in-law made her boldest mistake. Drunk on her sense of absolute control, she decided to deliver the final blow even before her youngest son's wedding. She drafted a document, a unilateral contract declaring that the bride voluntarily renounced any right to the family's present or future assets, a paper that would turn the wife into a servant with no legal rights. She presented the document during dinner, in front of the entire family. "It's just a formality," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "To protect what we've built as a family. I'm sure you understand." She slid the paper across the table, along with an expensive pen. "Sign here." The silence in the room was thick. The husband stared at his plate, unable to face the situation. The other family members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Everyone knew this crossed every line of decency. But no one dared to confront the matriarch. The bride picked up the document. She read every line carefully, her expression neutral. Inside, her heart raced, not from fear but from triumph. The mother-in-law had just created the most incriminating evidence possible. A document of coercion presented in public before multiple witnesses. She couldn't have asked for a better gift. "I need time to read it carefully," she said sweetly, folding the paper. "It's an important document. I want to understand every detail before making any decision." It was a perfectly reasonable response, impossible to dispute without appearing even more coercive. The mother-in-law frowned, annoyed by the delay. But she nodded. "You have until tomorrow," she decreed. "After that, we'll need to have a serious conversation about your future in this family." The bride took the document to her room, and the next morning, before anyone woke up, she photographed it from every possible angle and sent the images to her lawyer, along with an audio recording of the dinner where the document had been presented. The lawyer responded in minutes. "This is documented coercion, pure gold in terms of evidence. Do not sign anything." She had no intention of signing, but she returned the document to her mother-in-law during breakfast with a humble request. "I'd like to consult a lawyer first," she said softly, "just to understand it better. You always say it's important to make informed decisions." The matriarch turned red with rage. How dare her daughter-in-law question her, even politely? But she restrained herself. She couldn't appear completely irrational, not yet. "Very well," she spat the words. "But this is your last chance to cooperate voluntarily. After this, there will be consequences." Consequences. The word hung in the air like a threat. The family witnessed the tension, the power in conflict. But what they didn't see was the bride's internal smile. Every threat was more evidence. Every display of power was more ammunition. The trap was closing, and the mother-in-law was so confident she didn't even notice the chains tightening around her. That afternoon, the bride made her riskiest move. She sought out her husband's younger sister, a young woman who had always been kind to her, who had always seemed uncomfortable with her mother's methods. In a discreet cafe, away from family eyes, she asked a simple question. "Have you ever wanted to be free of her?" The young woman was silent for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "Every day of my life," she whispered, and she began to tell her own story. Years of manipulation, control, emotional sabotage. Her mother had destroyed relationships, blocked career opportunities, kept her daughter trapped in a gilded cage of dependency. The bride listened, offered comfort, and then made a proposal. What if there was a way to change this? To break the control she has over all of us? The young woman looked at her with a mixture of hope and fear. "Would you really do that?" "I am doing it," the bride replied. "And I need your help. Not much, just when the time comes, I need you to tell the truth about what you saw, about what you lived through." The young woman hesitated only a second before extending her hand. They shook hands firmly. Another ally gained, another piece positioned on the board. The days passed, and tension filled the house like a gathering storm. Beatrice sensed her control slipping but couldn't figure out why. So she pushed harder. More demands, crueler words, more psychological games. She thought she was tightening the noose. She was actually digging her own grave. On Friday of that critical week, just 10 days before her son's wedding, the event Beatrice had been planning to weaponize for her final power move. She called a family meeting with an ultimatum ready. "You sign by Monday," she said, pointing at Clara, "or you walk out that door with nothing. Let's see how long that pretty face helps you on the street." The family froze. Some weak protests. Ricardo started to defend her, but Beatrice cut him off with one look. Monday, final decision. That's all there is to say. Clara kept her head down, shoulders sagging like a defeated woman. I'll think about it," she whispered. But if anyone had looked closely in that moment, they would have seen something in her eyes. Not tears, not fear. Cold certainty. That night, she made her final calls. "It's time," she told her lawyer. "Prepare everything. To the accountant, I need those reports finalized. To her witnesses, get ready. To her one ally inside the family, stay strong. This happens Monday." Then she called her mother, the one person she'd kept away from all this. "Mom, I need you to trust me. Things are going to happen in the next few days. Bad things, but I know what I'm doing." Her mother, who knew her better than anyone, understood what she wasn't saying. "I trust you," she said quietly. "You've always been stronger than they think. Do what needs to be done. I'm here." The weekend passed in eerie silence. Beatrice was radiant certain of her impending victory. Clara would sign on Monday, she was sure. If not, she'd be thrown out with nothing. Either way, Beatrice would win. She had all the advantages, all the power, all the cards. At least, that's what she believed. What Beatrice didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that every threat she'd made was recorded, every demand documented. Every moment of emotional abuse had witnesses. Every suspicious financial transaction was being traced. The chains she thought she was wrapping around Clara were actually the ones around her own wrists. Clara spent Sunday going through her files one last time, confirming, double-checking. Every document organized, witnesses briefed and ready, lawyer prepared. Backup plans A, B, and C ready for anything. She didn't just have a case, she had a fortress. And tomorrow, on the Monday Beatrice expected to be her ultimate triumph. Everything would burn. That last night before everything changed, Clara stayed awake watching the stars. Was she scared? Yes. But courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward anyway. Tomorrow would be the day everything shifted. The trap was set. Every piece positioned perfectly. Every evidence ready. Beatrice had spent weeks building what she thought was a prison for her daughter-in-law. She'd actually built her own execution chamber. And Monday morning, when those doors slammed shut, she wouldn't see it coming until it was already over. Because here's what Beatrice never understood. You can't break someone who's decided they won't break. You can't control someone willing to lose everything for freedom. And you absolutely cannot defeat someone who's turned all your weapons into evidence. 3 in the morning. The sun would rise soon, and with it, the day Beatrice expected to be her triumph would instead become her undoing. The trap was perfect, the outcome predetermined. All that was left was watching it spring. Monday morning. The air felt different, heavier, like the atmosphere before a lightning strike. Clara woke at 5 without an alarm. Her body knew. This was the day. She didn't shake as she got dressed. No tears in the mirror. Her eyes reflected something cold, focused, like polished steel. Because Clara had spent weeks building something. Not a wedding, a trap. And today, every piece would fall exactly where it was supposed to. Meanwhile, the mother-in-law also woke up early. But for completely different reasons. She was radiant, almost feverish with excitement. Because today was the day her masterful plan would finally be executed. The day she would take the baby. The day she would prove to the whole world that this woman was never worthy of her family. She already had everything prepared. Forged documents showing Maria was unstable. Paid witnesses ready to confirm nervous breakdowns that never happened. A corrupt lawyer waiting with emergency custody papers. Even a private psychiatric clinic was on standby. Her plan was simple and brutal. In the middle of the reception, in front of all the guests, she would publicly accuse Maria of being an unfit mother. She would present the false documents. She would claim custody of the baby for its own safety. And with the social pressure, the shock, the confusion, she counted on no one having time to react before it was too late. She had even prepared the speech, practiced it in front of the mirror dozens of times. Every word designed to destroy. Every pause calculated for maximum dramatic impact. My son deserves better than this. That would be her opening line. The initial cut. But what the mother-in-law didn't know was that Maria wasn't alone in this game. Far from it. The ceremony started at 10 a.m. sharp. 300 guests filled the church. All the money, all the power, all the influence of the city's elite. Exactly as Beatrice had orchestrated. The perfect audience for her public execution. or for Clara's public coronation. Maria walked down the aisle with the baby in her arms. Not in a stroller. In her arms, deliberately, she wanted everyone to see. She wanted her mother-in-law to see. That baby was safe, loved, protected. The mother-in-law smiled when she saw her, but it wasn't a smile of approval. It was the smile of a predator watching its prey walk into a trap. Perfect, she thought. The more devoted a mother she appears now, the more shocking it will be when I reveal the truth. The wedding proceeded. Vows were exchanged. Rings were placed. The priest declared the couple husband and wife. Applause filled the church. Everything normal, everything traditional, everything exactly as it should be. But beneath this normalcy, two women waited for the same moment. The reception, the final stage. The party began in the hall annexed to the church. Music, food, dancing, champagne flowing freely. The atmosphere was one of genuine celebration. No one suspected a thing. The mother-in-law waited patiently. She wanted the perfect moment, when everyone was present, when attention was high, when the impact would be maximum. At 2:30 p.m., Beatrice stood. She picked up a spoon and clinked her champagne glass. Conversation stopped. Everyone turned. "I'd like to propose a toast," she announced, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Everyone smiled. They expected words of blessing from the mother-in-law for the new daughter-in-law. They expected the traditional maternal speech of welcome to the family. They had no idea what was about to happen. "You all know I've always wanted the best for my son," she began, walking slowly to the center of the hall. "And as a mother, it's my duty to protect him, even when that means making difficult choices." Clara stayed seated, watching, waiting. No panic. No surprise. Just observation. Beatrice continued. "Look at her with that baby. Looks perfect, right? But I've discovered something. Something that breaks my heart, but I can't stay silent." Dead silence. You could hear breathing. "Clara isn't well," Beatrice said, her voice shaking with fake emotion. "She's been having psychotic episodes, violent breakdowns, unstable behavior. And I have medical proof." She gestured to her lawyer, who walked forward with a briefcase. Gasps echoed. Whispers started. 300 pairs of eyes suddenly shifted to Clara. The groom, Ricardo, stood. "Mother, what are you—" "Protecting my grandson," Beatrice cut him off. "Protecting you. This woman is dangerous. I have the proof right here." The lawyer began handing out papers. Fake medical reports. Fabricated witness statements. All perfectly forged. All looking completely real. "I've already filed for emergency custody," Beatrice announced, her voice rising dramatically. "For the baby's safety, he has to be taken from her immediately. I'll assume temporary guardianship until she gets psychiatric help." This was her moment. The nuclear strike. Her final humiliation of Clara. The family reeled in shock. Some stared at the papers in horror. Others looked at Clara in disbelief. A few seemed almost impressed by Beatrice's bravery in this supposed intervention. Beatrice turned to Clara, triumph blazing in her eyes. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice oozing false concern. "You need help. The baby needs safety. Please don't make this harder." She reached for the baby. This was her dream moment. Total victory. Absolute humiliation. Clara looked at her for a long moment, then smiled, not nervous, not defeated. The smile of a hunter watching prey spring the trap. "Are you done?" Clara asked, her voice steady as ice. Beatrice froze. That wasn't the reaction she expected. She'd planned for tears, screams, desperate arguments. Not this frozen calm. "Because if you're finished," Clara said, slowly standing, "now it's my turn." She nodded once, and 3 people entered through the back doors. A man in a suit, a woman with a police badge, another lawyer with his own briefcase. "Everyone," Clara announced, her voice cutting through the hall. "I'd like you to meet Detective Silva, Officer Carvalho, and my attorney, James Morrison." The color drained from Beatrice's face. "Look at those documents she just handed out," Clara said, walking to the center of the room. "Medical reports, witness statements, custody orders. Looks official. Looks real." She paused. "It's all fabricated." The hall erupted in confused murmurs. 3 weeks ago," Clara continued, "I found out Beatrice was planning this, paying people for fake testimonies, bribing lawyers. So I did the smart thing, documented everything." Detective Silva stepped forward. "Mrs. Beatriz," he said directly. To her, "You're under arrest for forging documents, fraud, bribery, and attempted parental kidnapping." The corrupt lawyer bolted. 2 security guards everyone had missed stepped forward and blocked the door. "Every conversation with this lawyer was recorded," Clara said, her voice cold and authoritative. "Every forged document traced. Every bribed witness has already confessed. Your entire plan is documented." She turned to the family. "Want to hear the recordings, or just read the bank statements where she paid these people?" Morrison began distributing files, transcripts, photographs of secret meetings, bank transfers, emails planning the whole thing in detail. The family read through the documents. Shock, horror, fury. "You were going to steal your own daughter-in-law's baby?" Ricardo's sister whispered, her voice breaking. "With fake documents?" Beatriz went completely pale, shaking, because now she finally understood. She hadn't fallen into a trap. She'd built her own executioner's block, and Clara had just waited for the perfect moment to pull the lever. "Everyone here heard every word," Clara said calmly. 300 witnesses to you admitting all of this, in front of everyone that matters." Ricardo stood slowly, looking at his mother with a mix of shock and revulsion. "You tried to take my baby from me. I was protecting you!" Beatrice screamed, her composure shattering. "That woman doesn't deserve—" "Stop," Ricardo said, his voice hard. "You weren't protecting me. You were controlling me, like you always have. But this time, you went too far." He looked at Clara, really looked at her. Not as the woman his mother disapproved of, but as the woman who'd outsmarted an entire conspiracy, who'd documented everything, who'd engineered this perfect takedown. "You knew," he said. "It wasn't a question." 3 weeks, Clara said. Every day was part of letting her expose herself. Officer Carvalho approached Beatrice. "We need you to come with us. You have the right to remain silent and to an attorney. Your current lawyer is also under arrest." She looked around, desperately searching for someone, anyone who would defend her. She found only condemnation, disgust, horror. Her own sister wouldn't meet her eyes. Her cousins shook their heads in shame. Her friends were already texting, distancing themselves from the scandal. In one moment, decades of carefully built reputation evaporated. Everyone in that room saw her true nature. Everything she'd feared, becoming exposed, publicly humiliated, revealed as a monster, was now reality. "How dare you!" she hissed at Maria, her voice full of final venom. "How dare you humiliate me like this!" Maria stepped closer, looked directly into her mother-in-law's eyes, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of all the manipulations, suffered, all the silent humiliations, all the psychological games of the past few months. "You tried to destroy me at what should have been the happiest moment of my life. You tried to steal my child. You tried to paint me as crazy in front of all society, and you ask how I dare?" She took another step closer. "I didn't humiliate you. You humiliated yourself. I merely gave you enough rope to hang yourself." Absolute silence in the hall. Then, slowly, someone started clapping. Ricardo's aunt, then another person, then another, until the entire room was applauding. Not polite wedding applause. This was recognition, respect, admiration for a woman who faced systematic abuse and responded with strategic brilliance instead of tears. Beatrice was led away by police, handcuffed next to her lawyer. The forged documents confiscated as evidence. Clara stood in the center of the room, holding her baby, that ice-cold composure still perfect. But now everyone finally saw what she really was. Not a victim, not a submissive daughter-in-law, a brilliant strategist who turned her enemy's own weapon into their execution. As the guests tried to process what they'd witnessed, Ricardo's family reeling from the betrayal, Clara looked at her husband with something unreadable. Because this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. She'd won the battle. Now came the war. The dust was starting to settle, but the earthquake that shook that family still reverberated in every room of that house. In the days that followed the revelation in the dining room, when the mother-in-law saw her own voice projected on television, confessing her attempt at poisoning, something fundamental broke. Not just in the family dynamic, but in the very power structure that woman had built over decades. The daughter-in-law observed everything with an impressive calm. As she held the baby in her arms, she watched the family members process the impact of those images. The husband didn't sleep that night. He sat in the living room, mentally rewinding every moment of the past few months. Every time his mother said something about his wife, every occasion he should have questioned, should have defended, should have seen. "How did I not notice?" he murmured to himself, his head in his hands. "How could I have been so blind?" But the blindness was ending now, and what he saw devastated him. In the next 3 days, the full truth began to emerge, because that recording on television was just the first act. The daughter-in-law had documented everything. Absolutely everything. Every venomous text message the mother-in-law sent to family members defaming her. Every recorded call where she conspired to sabotage the marriage. Every email to acquaintances, spreading lies about the incompetent wife who was destroying her son. And when the daughter-in-law presented this complete documentation to her husband, sitting with him at the kitchen table with chronologically organized folders, he finally saw the extent of the war that had been waged against his wife while he remained oblivious. "She sent messages to your coworkers," the daughter-in-law said calmly, showing the screenshots. "Trying to ruin your professional reputation. Said you were being controlled, manipulated, that I had alienated you from the family." The husband read each message with growing horror. "She contacted my family," the daughter-in-law continued, her voice still serene but firm. "Told my mother I was neglecting the baby, that the house was dirty, that I wasn't good enough for you." Silent tears began to stream down his face as he turned the pages of that meticulous documentation. "And when I found out I was pregnant again," the daughter-in-law took a deep breath, her hand instinctively going to her still discreet belly. She increased the intensity, because she knew. She knew that another baby would consolidate our family, make it harder to break me, and drive me out. The husband looked up, shocked. "You're pregnant?" 10 weeks, she confirmed. "And this time, our child will be born safely, because this time, you are awake." It was at that moment that something fundamental changed in the husband. The guilt he felt transformed into steely determination. He had failed to protect his wife. He had failed to see the war being waged in his own home. But he would not fail again. "What do you need from me?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "What do I need to do to fix this?" And it was then that the daughter-in-law revealed the second phase of her plan. Because documenting wasn't enough. Exposing wasn't enough. She needed to ensure that this could never happen again. That no other wife, no other daughter-in-law, no other innocent baby could fall victim to that woman. "We're going to the authorities," she said calmly. "Attempted poisoning is a crime. The documented threats are a crime. The systematic emotional manipulation of a vulnerable elder can be considered abuse." The husband swallowed hard. Prosecuting his own mother, the idea was devastating. "I know what I'm asking," the daughter-in-law continued, her hand gently touching his. "I know she's your mother, but she tried to kill me. She tried to kill our baby, and if we let her get away with it, she'll do it again. Maybe not to me, but to the next wife, the next daughter-in-law, the next target she considers a threat to her control." She was right. He knew she was right. "Furthermore," the daughter-in-law added, her voice taking on a more strategic tone, "we need a restraining order, legal documentation prohibiting her from approaching me, the baby, or our home. Permanent protection, not just temporary promises." And then came the final move, the advanced element that would ensure lasting protection. "And we're going to make this public," she said, observing his reaction. "Not vindictively, but we're going to legally document everything. Create a public record that anyone can access. Because women like your mother thrive in secrecy. They rely on victims remaining silent out of shame or fear. But when there's a public record, when there are documented consequences, their power disappears." It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Because it wasn't just about protecting herself. It was about creating a precedent, a protective barrier that would continue to exist even if emotional memory faded over time. The husband nodded slowly, the reality of what they were about to do weighing on him. "Let's do it. All of it." And they did. In the following weeks, the process unfolded with surgical precision. The police were contacted, the evidence was presented, lawyers were hired, and the mother-in-law, who had reigned absolute over that family for decades, found herself facing real consequences for the first time in her life. The criminal proceedings moved forward. The charges included attempted poisoning, terrorist threats, and systematic harassment. The evidence was irrefutable. The recordings, the messages, the testimony of the husband who had finally awakened. The extended family was shocked. Some initially refused to believe. She would never do that, insisted those who had been blind to her true nature. But when they saw the evidence, when they heard the recordings, when they confronted the documented reality, Shock gave way to horrified understanding. The mother-in-law tried to manipulate the narrative, as she always had. She called all the relatives, crying, declaring herself a victim of a cruel and vengeful daughter-in-law. But this time, no one believed her, because this time there was proof. Concrete evidence that could not be distorted or reinterpreted. And then came the verdict, guilty, on all counts. The sentence included probation, substantial fines, and most importantly, a permanent restraining order. She was legally prohibited from approaching her daughter-in-law, the baby, or her son's home. Any violation would result in immediate arrest, but the legal consequences were only the beginning, because the mother-in-law also faced something that frightened her even more: social ostracism. The community she had cultivated for decades, where she had built a reputation as a pious and devout matriarch, turned against her. The women from the prayer group avoided her. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid greeting her. Family members distanced themselves, ashamed and horrified. She had tried to poison a nursing mother and a baby. She had manipulated her own son. She had lied and conspired and caused deliberate harm. And now everyone knew. The daughter-in-law watched this unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because justice was being served. Sadness because she recognized the tragedy of it all. A woman so consumed by fear and the need for control that she destroyed herself. But sadness did not mean regret, because there was a new life growing inside her. A baby who deserved safety. A child who deserved an absent grandmother instead of a toxic one. A family who deserved peace. The husband transformed completely during this period. The guilt he carried motivated him to become the partner and protector his wife always deserved. He took on household responsibilities he once considered women's work. He woke up for night feedings, changed diapers without complaint, and most importantly, he started therapy. "I need to understand how I was so manipulated," he told his wife one night, as they cradled the baby together. "I need to ensure I'll never be so blind again." She touched his face tenderly. "The fact that you recognize it is already transformative." "It's not enough," he insisted. "You almost died. Our baby almost died. Because I didn't see, didn't act, didn't protect. That can never happen again." And it didn't. Because the husband didn't just wake up, he transformed. He became hypervigilant about protecting his nuclear family. He set firm boundaries with all family members, and he made it absolutely clear to anyone who tried to question his wife. She was the queen of that home, and he was her fiercest defender. The family dynamic was completely reorganized. The daughter-in-law, who had been treated as a tolerated intruder, was now recognized for what she always was: the stabilizing force, the protector, the true leader of that family. The in-laws, the father had remained strangely passive throughout, were informed that they would not have access to their grandchildren until they demonstrated genuine change and complete respect for the children's mother, and that was non-negotiable. A few months later, when the daughter-in-law's belly was already prominent with her second pregnancy, she was sitting on the sofa, caressing the baby sleeping in her lap. Her husband was in the kitchen preparing dinner, a routine that was now normal in their home. The house was quiet, safe, at peace, and the daughter-in-law allowed herself to reflect on the journey that had brought her there. She had arrived in that family as a naive and optimistic wife, expecting love and acceptance. She found war and attempted destruction, and through that war, she discovered something within herself she didn't know existed: and relentless strength, a strategic intelligence, a determination to protect that was more powerful than any weapon her mother-in-law could wield against her. "Never underestimate a mother protecting her children," she murmured to herself, looking at the sleeping baby. "Because she will find strengths she didn't even know she possessed. She will develop skills she never needed before. She will become relentless in her protection." The front door opened and her husband entered carrying groceries. He smiled when he saw her, that smile now free from the tension he carried when he lived between two warring women. Now he had made his choice, and he chose correctly. "How are my loves?" he asked, kneeling beside the sofa and kissing her forehead, then the baby's head. "We are well," she replied, her hand touching his. "We are safe. We are at peace." And it was true. The storm had passed. The war was over, and from its ashes emerged a stronger family. A wife who knew her own power, a husband who finally saw clearly, and children who would grow up in a home where love was not confused with control, where protection was not a disguise for abuse. The lesson was now crystallized, clear as day. Inner virtue, when tested, reveals its true strength. The apparent victim was, in reality, the queen in waiting. The woman who seemed weak was the strongest of all. And the one who tried to destroy through manipulation was, ultimately, destroyed by her own cruelty, exposed to the light. There is power in the hands that cradle babies. There is strategy in the mind that plans night feedings. There is relentless strength in the heart that beats for two. And when that power is awakened, When that strength is challenged, it becomes a force of nature that no manipulation can overcome. Months later, when the second baby was born, a healthy girl with her mother's eyes, the daughter-in-law held her for the first time and thought of everything this child would never have to endure. She would never have to smile when she wanted to cry. She would never have to swallow poison disguised as soup. She would never have to fear the grandmother who should have protected her, because her mother had fought that war so she wouldn't have to. She had exposed the darkness so her daughter could grow in the light. She had been strategic and relentless so her daughter could simply be a child. "Welcome to a safe home," she whispered to the newborn baby. "Welcome to a family that will love you unconditionally. Welcome to the world your mother made safe for you." And in that moment, with her two children, one in her arms, the other beside her on the sofa, and her transformed husband sitting nearby, the daughter-in-law finally allowed herself to feel complete victory. Not the cruel victory of revenge, but the just victory of successful protection. The victory that mattered. She had been tested by fire and emerged not burned, but tempered, transformed from apparent victim to revealed queen. And no one never again would underestimate the strength that resided in her maternal heart. Because in the end, this is the truth that resonates through the ages. A mother's love, when threatened, becomes the most powerful force on earth. Stronger than manipulation. Stronger than control. Stronger than decades of tyrannical dominion. It is the force that moves mountains, exposes truths, and rebuilds worlds. And woe to anyone who awakens this force expecting to find weakness. Because they will discover, too late, that they have challenged something invincible. If you believe that inner strength triumphs over external manipulation, that protective love overcomes toxic control, and that justice, even when delayed, eventually prevails, know that this story is living proof. Proof that appearances can be deceiving, that true strength often wears the disguise of gentleness, and that underestimating a mother protecting her children is the most dangerous mistake anyone can make. The daughter-in-law closed her eyes, her babies safe in her arms, her husband by her side, her home finally at peace, and she smiled, because she had won, not through cruelty or revenge, but through strategy, courage, and the relentless strength of maternal love. And this victory, built on justice and protection, was a victory that would last forever. Order was restored, not the old order of control and manipulation, but a new order. An order where love was genuine, where protection was real, and where the true queen, the one with the courage to protect instead of control, finally occupied her rightful throne. And all who witnessed this transformation learned a lesson they would never forget. Never, ever underestimate the quiet woman cradling a baby, because within her may reside the strength that shakes empires, exposes tyrannies, and rebuilds worlds. This is the promise of inner virtue. This is the strength of maternal love. And this is the victory of those who protect instead of control, who love instead of manipulate, who choose the light even when darkness seems easier. In the end, always, always the light wins.